To understand the definition of PSU technically. So the technical definition of any public sector unit is uh, it's about the ownership of the ownership. So ownership, if the ownership is more than 50%, 50 or 51, that is 51 or more than 51%, then it is public sector. Then it is public sector. That is, the ownership is more than 50%. Why this is 50%? Because it's all about the decision making affairs, decision making. So the individual who is having a share of 51% or more than 51%, he is having the decisive role in the decision making, and the entity which is holding shares more than 51% is said to be, the other technical term is strategic partner. In case of public sector units, the strategic partner is the government, and this government can either be central or state or a joint venture. So why there was need of public sector units? As we discussed, after the independence, uh, the focus was on two fronts. One was economic and other was social. Economic means the basic idea, return on investment, as well as providing basic infrastructure to the country. Social in the sense that to promote regional development, right? And secondly, to provide finances to the people so that they can take care of themselves or their welfare. So public sector units are basically not only about the economic front, they are basically having the twin objective of economic and social. So post independent, the focus was with economic development with social perspective. Now then comes who will come to the forefront to deal with these two issues. As I discussed at that time, private sector either was non-existent, right? Even if it was existent, it was to a very limited extent, very limited. Limited businessmen were there like Tatas, Birlas, right? So you can't expect two or three families to be present everywhere. So it was assumed, it was understood that who should lead the front. Then the government cannot uh, abdicate from its responsibility, because it's the responsibility of the government to take care of the people. So if the private people are not coming, then government cannot say, okay, they are not coming, then we should also not go, because it's the responsibility. It's not only the moral but the constitutional responsibility of the government. So that's why government came to the front to take uh, public sector as an instrument. Public sector was taken as an instrument for the development. And the basic objective, as we discussed in the planning, the basic objectives were self-reliant, economic growth, modernization, equity. Right? So if we can recall second 5-year plan, and that was basically nothing but Mahalanobis plan. Mahalanobis plan spearheaded or gave the idea of setting up of public sector units. And Industrial Policy Resolution 1956 was in accordance with second 5-year plan, right? And that focus upon the development of the public sector enterprise. And the objective was to promote the growth in the core areas. Core areas means, as we discussed in the IIP, eight core factories, which are defined as the core factories like fertilizer, steel, electricity, refining, oil exploration, and they were said to be the strategically important sectors. And if you can again recall the first category in this Industrial Policy Resolution 1956, that was basically reserved for the government itself. Then if you see this cartoon, this is basically the an attempt of Nehruji to have a balance between, he was trying to have a balance between private sector and public sector, but as it shows that it was inclined towards public sector. So reason can be many, like he was more worried about the monopolistic nature of private sector. So he was more focusing on this public sector. Secondly, he was, as I said in the planning, that he was motivated or influenced by the Russian socialism. That's why he focused upon the public sector units without neglecting the private sector. That's why if you talk about socialism in India, that is democratic socialism. More appropriately, you have gone through polity, democratic socialism, right? That means, and or another you can say mixed economy in that sense, mixed. So this private sector was existent at that time also, or technically it was allowed. Technically, private sector was allowed to enter into the industrial sector. Then, if we see the objectives of PSUs, building up of infrastructure for development explained, creating employment opportunity, it was the part of, see, if you see the employment opportunities provided in PSUs, many a times it has been argued that the efficiency is comparatively low in PSUs. One of the reason for this is that because of the socialistic aspect of the public sector units. Because if you see in private sector, a single person is doing the work for which in public sector units you will see that 3 or 4 people are hired for the same work. Actually, the government assumes that. Sir, please once again explain about why ownership 51 more than 51%. I'll explain it to you. Wait, let me complete yourself, whoever is. Right. So this is because it's a social perspective of the public sector units, because they want maximum welfare of the people. How welfare will take place of the people? Either the government distribute freebies among the people, or uh, hiring more and more people despite the fact that there is no requirement. What is Narega? Right. Narega, as I said, the Keynesian theory states that dig well and fill the well. There is no effective value addition in the economy by Narega activities, but still government knows that, because it is more about the social perspective of the public sector units. Promotion of rapid economic growth in the sense that it was basically setting up the basic infrastructure in the economy. Because it was, if you see the public sector units, mostly public sector units were in the core areas, right? Starting from your ONGC, your steel power plants, your electricity, NTPC, NHPC, right? All these were in the core areas. Right? Diversification of the economy in the sense that these core areas or the public sector units which were established were across the economic spectrum. It was not like that they were only restricted themselves to the oil sector. They were restricting themselves to the particular sector. Rather, if you have gone through the NCRT, which I gave you yesterday in planning part, there you will see it was presence in producing bread and to the areas of hospitality like Ashoka Hotel. Right? That means everywhere there was presence of economy, not only the core sector. Basically, it was about the core sector, but it was across the economy. That means the focus was on diversification of the economy. Reduction of inter-regional disparities, as I already explained, that it was about more, this was a socialistic idea, social perspective, that the focus of the government was more of a social, that means the focus was on promoting regional equality or removal of regional disparity rather than focusing on efficiency. Because of the government at that time might have focus upon the efficiency of the public sector units, and all the public sector units might be centralized in the city areas. And if all were located in the city areas, then who was there to take care of the regionally undeveloped region, regionally backward regions, right? For example, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and some regions of Telangana, right? So the basic objective of the public sector unit at that time was to promote regional or to remove the inter-regional disparities, generating surpluses for further investment. This I'll discuss later on in detail in the coming slides. So if this is only for understanding, if you talk about the classification of the public sector units, they can be classified as public sector enterprises, center public sector enterprises, and public sector banks. Public sector enterprises means more specifically state public sector enterprises. Central public sector enterprises were classified as strategic and non-strategic. Right? Strategic in the sense that this definition has changed now, and we will be discussing this classification is the old classification, right? Atomic, defense, and railway. Status of the PSU is just for your understanding. Now, what happened? I'll come to this later on. This is for your general understanding that list of Maharatnas companies in India, right? BHEL, BPCL, Coal India, GAIL, HPCL, IOCL, NTPC, ONGC, PGCL, Steel Authority of India Limited. Right. Status of PSU is the recent status of the public sector units, and it's as per the Survey of Public Enterprises Survey 1989. There were this around 348 central public sector units. Out of these, 249 are operational. See, this is only for your information, nothing else. Remaining 86 were under construction and 13 were under closure or liquidation. There are 10 Maharatnas, 14 Navratnas, and 74 Miniratnas. 71 loss-making PSUs with a loss of 31,261 crores. Now, coming to this part, we have to talk about, analyze the functioning of the PSUs after 1947. Then we will analyze what happened after 1991 with respect to the public sector units. So if you see the performance of the public sector units, it resulted into capital formation and development of the core industries. Capital formation, I have already explained, the development of the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure, right? It can be either physical or social. Right? And as yesterday I discussed Harrod-Domar model. As per the Harrod-Domar model, these PSUs channelize savings to the regular investment. This is Harrod-Domar model, nothing else, which resulted into GDP growth. Right? So in third 5-year plan, the investment through PSU reached to generate to the 60% of the total savings. It's self-explanatory. Development of basic infrastructure explained. Balanced regional development explained. Social welfare explained. Employment generation explained. Contribution to public exchequer. See how they contribute to the public exchequer. For example, now coming to question of Navya, she was asking something related to 51%. See, if you are having a company or anything in a partnership, then the decision making rests with the person who is having maximum shareholding, right? And in the Indian context, if an individual is having shareholding of more than 50%, that means he is said to be the decisive factor in decision making about the company. Technically, we called him as strategic partner. Strategic. He is important in the sense that he is very much influential in taking the decision about the company because he is having 50% of the shareholding in the company. That's only important part. On what basis that Maharatna, Mini Ratna, and Navratna? I am coming, Shiva. I am coming. Uh, Navya, is it clear that why this theory of 51%? Right? The theory of 51% is because the individual who is holding, simple. It's like if you start a company and your shareholding in that company, the individual who will be having more shareholding in the company will have more decision making power, right? So if you are having shareholding in any company more than 51%, that means decision cannot be taken without your consent because you are owner of 51%. On the similar manner, if the government is holding shareholding of more than 51%, that means it is the strategic partner. That means no management decision about the company cannot take place without the consent of the government. This is basically why this 51% ownership matters. Coming to Sumant Pila, public exchequer is nothing but the government. Public exchequer means the sarkar, right? Public exchequer means contribution to public exchequer means, see how public sector are funded. Public sectors are nothing. Public exchequer is nothing but, see what happens in our country or in any country, that basically what is happening in a country, that you and we, that is the citizen of a country, are paying the taxes. These taxes are collected by, these taxes are being collected by the government of India, right? Or they are distributed to the state governments. This government of India is now investing this money into public sector unit. This is happening now. We are saying again and again, we are saying that 51% is of the government. What does it mean? It means basically, if this public sector unit value is rupees 100, then out of it, more than 51% belongs to the government of India or state government, 51%. Then this will be called as public sector unit, right? Now it is clear. So public exchequer is nothing but this Sarkar, this government. And this money belongs to the people of India, to the citizens of India. That's why it is said to be public. Public means we the people, and the government is basically public, right? It take in that sense, right? So what happens that when this public sector unit, the government is having, for example, 75% of the stake in any public sector unit, and this public sector unit states that I have profit of, for example, 100 crores, right? Now this public sector unit will say that we announce that we will pay our investors a dividend. I think we discussed when we were discussing in the first slide, that if you have borrowed money from someone, then it is taken as debt, and in lieu of that debt, the company will pay certain dividend, right? Certain dividend. And that dividend is basically, in this case, 75% of the stake is of the government. That means Sarkar has given 75% borrowing money to this company. That means if this company is giving dividend of 10 crore in total, 10% of the total profit, right? Then this, out of this 10 crore, 75% of the dividend, that is 7.5 crores, will go to the government of India. And this says the same thing, contribution to public exchequer. That means the company is paying dividend to the government of India based upon, yes, dividend is sharing of profit, right? Right, based upon their contribution or shareholding. Promotion of import substitution, it is again clear. I have discussed time and again. Economic growth, it is again very much clear. Now, these were the positive aspects of these public sector units. Now, there were certain issues with the public sector units, like inappropriate investment decisions. The best example to understand this is if you can recall the time of UPA to or prior to 2014, you might have heard that number of times every government was announcing schemes in the railway budget. And the most popular schemes were most of the trains has to pass through Bihar, irrespective of its feasibility or not. Secondly, the railways were announcing setting up of new factories in Raebareli, right, and Amethi and Bihar. These were basically the constituency of Gandhi family, right? Raebareli of Rajiv Gandhi, Amethi of Srimati Sonia Gandhi. And Bihar was most of the railway minister has been from Bihar, and that's why every time whenever there was every year the schemes were announced for these three locations, despite the fact that not out of those announcements, even 25% of the announcements were not realized on ground, right? That means even if certain decisions, certain investments were coming, but after a lot of investment and result was zero. That means, for example, you announce an investment of 1,000 crore rupees and you invested, for example, 100 crore rupees, and after 2 or 3 years you realize that this investment or this announcement was not feasible. That means until now this 100 crore rupees went into drains, right, of no use, that is leading to inefficiency. So the issue was that all these decisions were inappropriate. To give you an example, I don't know whether I have already explained it to you, that there was a Chuga Dam. I think if I'm not wrong, it is Khuga or Chuga. Google it. Khuga or Chuga Dam in Manipur. That this basically not a dam but multi-power project, but it was inaugurated by the foundation stone was led by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he was the vice chairman of the planning commission. Vice chairman. That means it was in 80s, and he inaugurated the opening ceremony of that multi-power project when he became the prime minister. I think around 2012 and something. I mean 2014, 13, 14, right? That means it take at least 30 to 40 years for a simple multi-power project. And for your surprise, Manipur, yes, it's in Manipur. And for your surprise, when Khuga Dam, yes, it's Khuga Dam. And for your surprise, when this dam was inaugurated, the electricity generation from this project at that time was declared zero. And the reason was it was analyzed that the detailed project report which was submitted in 1970s 80s was faulty. So this was the state of affairs. Second, improper pricing policy. And secondly, if the another thing you can understand, that whenever there are reports of planning commission, previous planning commission reports, which talks about a term gestation period. Gestation period. Gestation period I have already discussed you. Many of the projects have gestation period of more than 10 to 12 years, right? And the Ministry of Highways under the Nitin Gadkari, they are publishing the reports which talks about the gestation period, right? You can, whenever these reports are coming, you can also focus on those reports, which will give you a glimpse of such basic understanding. initiation to completion of project duration gets it right. Okay. Then improper pricing policy. The best example to understand the improper pricing policy of the regime of this subsidy regime in fuel prices. So if you talk about fuel prices, that means now it's no more. Right now it is centralized in fertilizer and this electricity. There's subsidy in electricity. So see the impact of this subsidy in the fuel prices. For example, the diesel was cheaper, and diesel is the most pollutant. It is more polluting than your petrol, and at that time people were purchasing diesel cars because diesel was comparatively cheaper. After the removal of this subsidy regime in fuel prices, the demand of diesel cars has comparatively get lowered. Right. So this is all about improper pricing. That means you were purchasing diesel because it was cheaper, and it was resulting into more and more pollution. Right. So at two fronts, you were the purpose was defeated. At one front, the consumption of the diesel was increasing, and on the second hand it was fueling the environmental degradation, right? Excessive overhead cost. See, overhead cost, this we are including because after independence the objectives were something different. As I said, that it was social as well as economic, but after 1991 the objectives were changed because the governments were more focused about economical aspects. So initially the government was hiring more because the focus was on welfare part, but after 1990s government now start looking otherwise. They now focus that now they have to think more about business means social aspect was to be neglected. Now they say that the PSUs are there for business, they are not for social welfare. Then coming to lack of autonomy and accountability. Can anybody explain me lack of autonomy and accountability? Anybody? You can use the audio. Anyone? Any?
So,
Please.
so lack of autonomy means the PSUs are under the hand of government, so they do not have any right or any independence to innovate themselves. They have to work according to what government says and what the society wants. I think that is lack of autonomy.
What's accountability? What's accountability? See, whenever you are being anybody, tell who is telling, who's speaking.
Accountability as in responsibility for their actions, and since probably because they hold 51% of the capital share, they are not very accountable to the consequences of their actions.
See, the best to understand is whenever you are writing any, if in mains any question is being asked regarding public sector unit, then you have to focus on these two terms because these are very important terms, and if these are clear to you, then you can answer any of the question. Now, autonomy are basically you have to understand that these go side by side, right? These go side by side. First thing. Secondly, how the it works. Accountability. We'll start with accountability. We said that this money is basically of the public money. This is not the money of the public sector unit. If the CMD is basically the custodian of the public money, the head of the company, head of the public sector is the custodian of the public money. That means he is accountable to the public. Who is public? Who is public? Public is basically represented by MP. Public is represented by MP, right? And this MP is representing the public. Who is an MP? MP is basically representing the public in the parliament, right? And what parliament has appointed a minister, right? This is the understanding now. That means what happens, this CMD is directly talking to the minister. He should be accountable to the money of the public. That means he should work in the public interest. But what is happening practically? This CMD is only looking towards the minister. He is only looking the blinking of the eye of the minister, nothing else. That means, and what minister is doing? Minister is only focusing on its constituency. He is only looking for its vote bank. He is not concerned about practically. I'm talking practically. So accountability issue says that this CMD was supposed to be accountable to the public money, but effectively it was in that means he has to take the decision in the benefit of the public money. What is the benefit of the public money? Return on investment. That means more and more efficiency in the public sector unit. But what this CMD was doing, he was taking inappropriate decisions. He was involved in improper pricing. He was involved in excessive overhead cost. All these issues were there because this CMD was not accountable for this public money. Rather, the definition of accountability was misunderstood by the CMD. Is it clear in the simple terms? Now, autonomy. Autonomy means that this CMD was supposed to take decisions for the company without being intervened by the government. Now, this is quid pro quo, right? It's a sort of best example of quid pro quo. CMD is saying to the minister, I'll please you. And this minister saying, okay, you please me, I'll please you. This is mutual. So CMD is taking the decisions with respect to what please the minister, and minister is saying that, okay, I will give you benefits. For example, he will appoint the CMD a person who is incompetent, right? He will always appoint a person who is incompetent. That means the person who is incompetent, how he can be autonomous? He will always try to oblige the minister. So if you see the existing scenario, what's happening, you will see the institutions, right? Institution, the people who are manning or heading the institutions are argued by, as the opposition argues, that they are toothless, they are spineless, because these people who are heading the institutions are not having the spines, they are incompetent. And because they are chosen based upon the preferential treatments, so they are not looking towards the benefit of the people. They're only looking towards their masters, right? So autonomy says that accountability means that this CMD was supposed to be accountable to the public money, and this autonomy means because he is not taking care of the public money, that's why minister is saying him or intervening him their day-to-day affairs, right? So this is how it works. Then comes overstaffing. It is again clear. Trade unionism, right? Trade unionism was very much prevalent prior to 1991. So especially in states like West Bengal and Kerala, left rule states. Underutilization of capacity is nothing but other name of overstaffing. And excessive political interference, already explained. Gestation period of projects is high, already explained. What is the question? A state of being responsible for the action is a state of being responsible for the actions. Yes, right. Lack of research and development in public sector units. See, public sector enterprises were not involved in anything innovative. Rather, they were just carrying out the day-to-day jobs. Right? Lack of skilled manpower in public sector enterprises. The public sector enterprise in most of the cases not able to utilize its full potential. Lack of management and planning in PSC is creating many issues and challenges, right? These are certain issues with public sector units. Now, if you see this example, state of Maharaja, that is Air India, right? So the sad story of Air India is basically because of this, that is politician. So if you see the decisions about Air India, and this is showing that the Maharaja is in the pocket of politician, because these people, the politicians, are having free rides in the name of one or another. There is so much of debt of Air India on public exchequer on account of that MPs and politicians are uh, traveling in Air India without paying the airfares, right? And not only that, the decisions government are taking are for the benefits of the private airlines, and that's why Air India suffered a lot. Then if you see this example, हालत बेकाबू हो रहे हैं कर्मचारी मेरे कपड़े ले गए बेचने के लिए. That means this is Maharaja, that is Air India. It is saying that the conditions are uncontrolled and some of the employees has even taken away my clothes. That means I am without clothes. That means I have lost my metal and I am left with nothing, right? And if you see this, the BSNL MTNL saga, this is business has shrunk. Business has shrunk because of the fall in, and it resulted into fall in revenue because your subscriber base has gone down. Why it has gone down? There are n number of reasons. For example, first, the issue of service quality, right? And besides this, there were n number of policy related issues. Expenses double of income. That means your expenditures are more than your income. Staff cost, salaries are very high. Your losses are consistently going up. Merger bill, that means it is when the government was planning to put BSNL and MTNL together. It was leading to a huge bill of 69,140 crores, right? So this is all about public sector unit, what went wrong. These are two classic examples. Now coming to this, in 1991, when the economy was opening up, then at that time it was decided to think about revival of the public sector units. So in LPG, we will discuss in detail. At that time, it was said that the P in LPG was privatization. So in the initially we saw that everything was reserved for the public sector units. Then in LPG, the industry reserved for the government were very limited. It was made an exception. Otherwise, everything was open for private. And a decision was taken to disinvest the public sector units. And it was said that the government and public sector units will work on two fronts, that is accountability and autonomy. Accountability and autonomy. How it works? It works on the pattern that the government has an understanding, memorandum of understanding, MOU, signed between government of India and public sector unit. And it says that the government of India said to the public sector unit, look, we will give you autonomy. We will give you this public sector unit will be given autonomy by the government of India. Autonomy in the sense that you can take certain decisions related to your investment. That means if you are investing, then you can take the decision about the investment at your own rather than going to the minister. We will not interfere you in your day-to-day decision making, in your day-to-day functioning, right? Rather, you are free to take your decisions. Then Government of India said again, put a condition to the public sector units in the form of accountability. Government of India said that we are giving you the autonomy, but it is with certain riders. And riders are in the form of accountability. You have to prove your accountability. Accountability in the sense that we will sign an agreement with you beforehand, 1 year, right? In the starting of a financial year, we'll be signing an agreement. And signing an agreement will be like that you have to ensure that there will be certain profit. Your turnover will be decided beforehand, and you have to sign this thing with us before the starting of the financial year. You will be accountable. Your accountability will be there in the form of achievement of all these things. That means if you declare that we will be earning a profit of 100 crores, now if you are not achieving a 100 crore profit, then that means you are not fulfilling your MOU target. That means you are breaching your contract of accountability. The moment you breaches your contract of accountability, we will take your autonomy. The moment you achieve this target of 100 crores, we will increase your autonomy. Right? So based upon that, there was certain categorization. The PSUs were categorized in the form of Navratnas. The basis was capital expenditure, human resource management, investment in joint ventures. That means if you fulfill certain preconditions or fulfill your MOU targets, then you will be categorized in Navratnas and you will be given more autonomy. This is basically Navratna. The concept of Maharatna is recent one in 2010, right? This concept came in 2010, and Maharatnas are nothing but the jewels of Government of India. And these are the most profit making companies, government companies, and they are having certain preconditions. The preconditions are that they should have any company, any PSU having turnover of more than 25,000 crores. They should be listed on stock exchange. They should have annual average profit more than 5,000 crores, and they should have average annual net worth of 15,000 crores. So this is how the categorization works. So if, for example, you are now Navratna, the category is like Mini Ratna, followed by Navratna, and now it is Maharatna. Maharatna is the most profit-making public sector units, followed by Navratna and then Mini Ratna. Now the government of India says that if you are in now Navratna, and if you achieve any of this target, then you will be transformed to Maharatna. What will be the benefits in Maharatna? That you will be given more and more decision-making autonomy in these respect. Capital expenditure, that means you can have more capital expenditure than Navratna. You can manage your human resource more autonomously than Navratna. You can invest as per your choice. So this is how this Maharatna, Navratna and Mini Ratna concept works. I think it is clear. Difference between annual turnover and net worth. See, annual turnover is, for example, you are having a company uh, and that company is having an asset of 100 crores. For example, you are having machines, you are having assets, then it will be net worth. 100 crores will be net worth. And annual turnover means that if you are producing any item out of that factory of, for example, 10 crores, then it will be annual turnover. Annual turnover will be less because it's the product. Annual turnover is nothing but a product, while net worth is the total assets of the company. Right. So coming to this, we will discuss it later on. Now coming to how I'll discuss this disinvestment part today. Disinvestment is nothing. After 1991, it was decided to start the process of disinvestment. Disinvestment means you are diluting the stake of the government from the public sector units. For example, initially the government is having 100% of stake in the company, 100%. Now what the government is doing, government is reducing its stake from 100 to 90, 90 to 85, and so on. And if the stack is still more than 51%, the company is still public sector unit. The moment this goes beyond 51, even if it is 49, this loses the tag of public sector. This is no more public sector unit, right? And the disinvestment, what is the benefit of disinvestment? Any idea? Do you have any idea? Is there any benefit of disinvestment? What will be the impact? I'm not asking positive impact. What will be the impact of disinvestment of the company, of a public sector unit? Any idea? What will be the impact of disinvestment of public sector unit? No, sir. Don't worry. See, now what happens that in case of public sector unit, the issue was of efficiency, accountability. Now, accountability, I discussed you that this CMD of the company was supposed to be accountable to the public. But what he was practically doing, he was showing his allegiance or obligations to the minister, right? Right. Now he was accountable or he was showing his allegiance to the minister because the money, the investor, major stake of the investment was with the government of India, and minister was nothing but he was representing the government of India. Now see, his stack is reducing. Initially he was having 100% stack. That means he was the whole sole decision maker in regarding to the public sector unit. Now what happened, this stack was diluted to 80%, for example, and this 20% of the stack went to the public, that is customer or shareholder at the stock exchange. Now see, the CMD is now accountable to this minister as well as to the public, right? As well as to the public. How his accountability to the public is ensured? It is ensured through the share market. Whenever any public sector unit which is listed on the share market is taking any of the decision with respect to the public sector unit, it is being informed to the SEBI. SEBI is the regulator of this share market, right? Equity market. So it means that now the accountability of share of CMD is divided between minister and the public. And this, what does this public wants? This public wants nothing except return on investment. That means efficiency. So more and more the stack of the minister is diluted. That is, the government of India is diluting its stack. More and more stack of the public is increasing, and more shareholding of the public is increasing. That means these people are demanding more and more efficiency from this company. Sir, any idea about Vizag Steel Plant? See, better to avoid any individual discussing any individual plan. But if I'm not wrong, the government is, I think, something planning to privatize or disinvest it. I'm not 100% sure, but something like that thing, like that are going on. I might be wrong. Right. We'll discuss that. What is the stand of the government now? Right. right? So in case of disinvestment, yes, it is the government is trying to privatize it. The this disinvestment means what you are doing, you are diluting your stake. Now, if this dilution of stake goes below 14 below 50%, it goes below 50%, that is either 49 or less than that, then it is said to be strategic disinvestments. Strategic. And the other term to this is privatization. That means if the disinvestment is until 51%, the government is holding, is doing this investment, but the ownership still rests with the government of 51%, it is only disinvestment. Once this shareholding goes below 51%, that is 50 or 49%, then it becomes strategic disinvestment. Why it is strategic disinvestment? Because government does not remain the strategic partner, because for strategic partnership you require more than 50% of the stack, and this process is said to be privatization. Any query? This is all for today. You can ask the questions. I'm expecting question from this PPT in the coming UPSC exam, because it's one of the hot potato nowadays taking place in the economy, and every now and then you will find new story on this issue, disinvestment, privatization. Everywhere you will find the strategic sectors. We'll discuss later on strategic sectors and all that. Are employees of PSU fired after privatization? Are there any provisions for their continuity? See, it is basically, if you want to understand this in a practical manner, you better follow the privatization of BPCL. Nowadays, the government is focusing on the privatization of BPCL, and what happened actually, practically what happens, the government has asked the BPCL employees either to take the VRS, voluntary retirement, or in the voluntary retirement they came up with certain benefits to them, or they asked them to continue with the BPCL. If they are continuing with the BPCL, then after the privatization of the company, all the terms and conditions will be regulated by the BPCL terms and conditions. There might be a possibility that government in this, while doing the privatization process, will have certain terms and conditions with the BPCL that about the take care of their employees after privatization. But again, all these things are eyewash. Ultimately, what matters to the private investor, private buyer, is the benefits, right? So I really doubt whether it will take care of the welfare of the employees or whatsoever it will be, right? It will be only to the benefits of the private sector, rather than it will be following the terms and conditions dictated by the government, right? Is LIC and privatization of some banks comes under this? Yes, it is. See, LIC right now is the government entity. The 100% stake rests with the government. Now, government is now planning to see, LIC is even not on the share market right now, right? It's not on the share market. Now, government is what the government is. Government will first bring its IPO, initial public offer. That means it will first bring into the share market. That means initially with the shareholding of 100%, the government is coming up with in the share market. Then what it will do? Then it will start diluting its stack. The first precondition to dilute the stack is that they have to bring it on the list on the share market. Then only they can privatize it now. So privatization is very far away process in case of this LIC. LIC is first to be listed, then the process of disinvestment start, then after it can be privatized. So in a near future, at least 10 to 15 years down the line, Uh, I don't see that LIC can be privatized, but anybody don't know the future that in the coming 5 years the government can say, okay, we are going to dilute the stack of the LIC, right, by 50%. Then what? Right? And what's the question? Wait, somebody is asking question. Privatization of some banks is yes, banks are being privatized. Banks are being privatized. Sir, disinvestment or privatization are used to mean simple. See, disinvestment, if the disinvestment is going below 49%, if the stack of the government is going below 49%, then it is said to be privatization. If the stack of the government remains more than 51%, then it is not privatization. But disinvestment below 49% is privatization, or strategic disinvestment is privatization. More appropriately, strategic disinvestment of public sector is privatization. Srikanth is asking, is it people didn't have enough capital to invest in industries during 1950s through tax augmentation this region? Those times they were not around. That's what I'm saying, that in the during the time of 1950s, there were many reasons why private industrialists were not coming to the forefront. First, they were not having enough money. They, in the opening comment, I stated that initially they were limited industrialists. They were limited people who were acting as industrialists. Unlike now you will find that people are having money. But at that time, they were limited people who were having access to money or having huge capital, right? Any other question? Right? What can be the rationale behind disinvesting profit-making PSUs? Uh, we will better discuss it. The first rationale is to improve the efficiency of the public sector unit. But talking about the existing scenario, see, there is no rationale of the government behind. They just want, in the name of simple sloganeering, that they want that the, the the business of the government is not to do the business, right? These basically are the ideas of if anybody is of the public administration, then when the government like invest more specifically, Thatcherism, New Deal policies, all these policies were basically talking about efficiencies in the public sector units. And all these aspects which were prevalent in 1970s or 80s in West were bring in the rubric of LPG in 1991 in India. And since then, they're saying that this investment means we are promoting efficiency in the public sector. But again, yes, after 1991, many public sector units became themselves so competent that they are challenging the hegemony of private sector, right? So again comes, even if you talk about the BPCL, so many people argue that the dividend given by the BPCL is so huge that government is so. There's a story na, that golden goose story, that for the sake of that golden egg, the poultry owner killed its goose who was giving him golden egg on a day-to-day basis. So many people argue that the government is going on the same path just for the sake of uh, um, cover its fiscal deficit. For the current times, they are killing all their public sector units. That we will analyze tomorrow.